Well, hello, hello, hello. We are back again with Man2Man. We're excited to have with us, back by popular demand, Terrence Ray. Terrence, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Pastor Burns. How about yourself?
I'm doing awesome, awesome, awesome.
Good,
So
good.
what do you think about last week, our Man2Man last week? What do you?
I think it went great, and I felt really good about it. And the one thing that let me know that it was fantastic is my mother watched it and said it was great. So
All right. Well, Mama
I'm
say that.
encouraged. Yeah,
And I know your mother, so I know if it was, she would.
she would have let both of us.
Right,
know. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Now, last week we was talking about men, and we were talking about how men, especially the African American men, needs to be more involved in the decision-making process. And,
Right.
and as we talked about that, we began to talk about how the African American male kind of feel like he's left out. Let's pick up right there, especially now in this election season, which is a crazy time right now.
Yeah.
And it seems like listening to the commentaries, they are talking about how the African American male vote is missing.
And to your point that the African American male, of which we both are, you could certainly appreciate any sentiment that, their voices aren't being heard. I mean, from the political climate that we're in to the overall social climate that we're in. If you look at what's happening with black males on the street, I mean, in the unrest with black males and the police. I mean, you have situations where black men are literally being gunned down in the street. So to feel like you're not being heard, it just goes along with the commentary that exists.
Okay. Now, you and I are in the process of planning a fatherhood nurturing program here in Milwaukee. We have one in Milwaukee, but we're expanding on that idea. And so when we think about that, how could we begin to help the African American male get more involved in the process? Now, I know we don't have the wherewithal to necessarily make their voice be heard on the other end, but how do we encourage them to help them to understand the process? It's a process.
Well, I think with the particular program you're talking about, the Nurturing Fathers program, the best place where you can start to help a man, feel that his voice is being heard is in his own home. And that's what the Nurturing Fathers program, in fact, does. And I know a lot of times you hear something like the Nurturing Fathers program, and the name is sort of like a misnomer because, nurturing and fathers.
Right.
And, I grew up in a time where, nurturing fathers, that didn't even go together. My dad was the silent, authoritative type.
Okay.
But you fast forward to where we are currently, and nurturing is a big part of parenting, particularly with with fatherhood. And it's all about your individual fatherhood or fathering style. And that's what you get a chance to see with the Nurturing Fathers program. You get a chance to compare your father's nurturing style with your very own nurturing style.
Okay. So now in the Nurturing Fathers, because I do agree when we think about nurturing, we think about our mothers. you
Right,
know.
right.
And I remember growing up with my dad. He was kind of the silent, authoritative type as well. And when I would ask my mother something, if the answer was no, she would never say no. She would always say, "Go ask your daddy." And then after a while, I caught on that because as soon as I went to ask my dad, he would always say no. And then it was later in my life as I grew up that I began to understand. Oh, they had a system.
Yes, what it was.
She was more the nurturing, and he was the bad guy. He was the one that was going to say no. So nurturing fathers don't seem like they go together. But now as we look at where men are now, that nurturing part that comes from a father is very pivotal in the life of a young man growing up.
Very, very. Well, there's a joke that you mentioned earlier about how, your mom would say, "Go ask your dad." There's a joke now that because it is a system, but the nurturing father might turn around and tell you if you ask a question, he might send you back to your mom. Go ask your mom now.
Okay.
But it is you know, it's actually getting involved. And what I love about the Nurturing Fathers program is it takes you on a journey, man, and it gets you to really look at the relationship or lack thereof that you had with your own father.
Okay.
Because it again, it takes you on a journey and gets you to look at, you know, specifics that went into the relationship between you and your own father.
Okay. Now, how would that, the nurturing fathers, how would that help when we're talking about getting the African American male, especially the young African American male, involved in the election process, involved in the decision-making process when it comes to the political arena, as well as when it comes to even the whole idea, because when we look at the media, a lot of times they paint a stereotype picture of the African American male, and even as you mentioned with the police and the killing, if we're not careful, we can paint the wrong picture there as well.
Exactly.
Because we know that all police is not bad,
Right.
and we know that if we're in an emergency situation, we gonna call
Right.
the police. So we do need them.
Right.
So,
Right.
but the taint of this whole defunding the police and the narrative of that
Right.
has been so tainted that we really misunderstand what that was intended. And so going back to how do we build that African American male to a place that he can trust the system to the degree that he's willing to be patient and engage in that process.
I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, going through the Nurturing Fathers program is a 13-week, 2.5-hour per week session where men actually are engaged in discussions about things that men typically don't discuss. Okay. So it gives them a vehicle to, quite frankly, get some things off their chest around other men who are going through similar circumstances. And when you find out that you're not the only one who whose daughter is driving them crazy, or when you find out you're not the only one who feels like he can't handle his son, or when you feel like you're not the only one who had a challenging relationship with their own father, you know, you begin you know, to embrace that a little bit easier. And it feels like, to be honest with you, it feels like, you know, some of the burden is lifted up off of you.
So it's not so much that we're not dancing around per se how to get that African American male engaged. And I'm not really sure that we have the answer. However, what would be some steps, you know, because I talked to some young men during this election season, and they were saying, you know, I don't like either candidate, you know, and I don't trust, you know, what he's saying, and I don't trust what he's saying. And then it's been a lot of rhetoric and at some point even unprofessional when it comes to how these debates and different things has been going on. And so how do you get that young African American male to understand the importance of this process, regardless to whether we get everything we want on the table or not?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, you know, we don't have all the answers. But I think it's important, again, referring back to the Nurturing Fathers program, to get young black males to get at a place of peace with themselves first.
Okay.
You know, and address some unresolved issues. Because, you know, if you just look at, from a behavioral standpoint, if you just look at some of the behavior that exists in our community, there's some, I think you will agree, there's some angry young brothers out there.
Okay.
You know, and if we begin to give them, and that's a direct, I think my opinion is that it's a direct result of where we started at from the very beginning, you know, feeling like their voices aren't being heard. And again, if you got an environment where, you know, they're feeling like their voices are being heard, then you can set the stage to begin to introduce them to some things like politics, because we can't just jump right into the issue of politics, because it's like a bloodbath sport, man. You can't, we're just not going to jump into it. But if we address some issues like, you know, that internal anger, you know, why are you so angry, man? And then you'll find out a lot when you begin to peel back the onion. You could begin to find out some of that deep-rooted anger has a whole lot to do with their relationship or lack thereof with their own father.
Okay.
And how that's translated into or transferred into their relationship with their own kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
So then, because you keep hitting that nurturing fathers, nurturing fathers,
Mm-hmm.
nurturing fathers, and so you're saying that in a lot of ways, those unresolved issues that come up in a person based on whether they did or did not have that father figure, or the relationships that they did or did not have with that father, plays into the terminology of the angry black man.
Exactly.
And as a result of that, there's onion layers, as
Mm-hmm.
you said, of different things that compound as a result of that.
Exactly.
And so you're saying that through a nurturing father, especially this program that we're looking at, expanding on or creating,
Mm-hmm.
you're saying that as we address those areas in the man's life where he's able to talk about things that men don't normally talk about, harbor in their hearts or keep in their minds, and be able to talk it out with other men and see that they're not alone, that's the beginning of walking down this pathway of not necessarily reinventing themselves, or for the most part really finding out who they are.
Exactly. Identifying things and areas that already existed in them.
Okay.
For instance, there's one of my favorite weeks during the 13-week session is, I think it's week 3, and it's called The Little Boy Within.
Okay.
And I mean, as a man, I'm sure you can identify with that. We all have a little boy within us, but because when we grow up, society tells us that you're a man now, at 18, and a man, and then we begin to get cornered in that box of all the things that society says a man or a male is supposed to do. He's not supposed to cry. He's not supposed to show emotions. But then you find out through the course of the 13 weeks that it's very manly to have emotions, because it's a human trait. We all have emotions. So we begin to identify those emotions that society out there tells us that we're supposed to beat them down. When you're showing your little 3-year-old or 4-year-old how to ride a bike, and you take the training wheels off and he falls down, get up. You ain't supposed to. Man, boy, if he fall down off his bike, wouldn't you cry too?
Right.
So I mean, it's those mixed messages that we begin to address, going through understanding that our being introduced, if you will, to our emotional intelligence, man.
Now you said the boy within. How long has my dad been dead? The boy within. I think about how long my dad has been dead, and when I've been running into things probably in the last couple of years more so that, man, I miss him. I wish I had him, because I was able to go to him and he would just give me the butt naked truth. He would just say what it is, and he would observe me at the church, and he would just say what needed to be said.
Right.
And it had helped me a lot. And lately, that boy within, I never thought about that, but now that boy within, I find myself longing for him and his advice, and having somebody I can talk to and they just be straight up with. So that's pretty interesting. You say that's in week 3.
I think that's in week 3, and we hear how young brothers are critical now, even older brothers who sit in front of the PlayStation and play the games, man. That's the little boy. We all play games, man. Basketball.
All right.
I'm a big LA Laker fan, but the game of basketball, that's a game we played on the playground.
Wow.
And we all that's just a little boy within each of us. And another week that I really, really like, man, is, I think it comes up in week 7. It's called a PlayStation, where all of the men in a 13-week session, upwards of 15 to 20 men, and you have to have enough room to do this, where you get in the area of the room and you create with your child. You actually, for the 2.5 hours you're doing the session, you create a play environment with you and your child, no matter how old that child is. So it's quality time for 2.5 hours, man.
Wow.
I mean, when you just think about it, 2.5 hours just with your kid, that's a long time.
That is, especially if they're older kids.
Right, exactly.
You know,
So, right.
when I try to I got two boys.
Okay.
And so 27-year-old and 24-year-old.
Okay.
And I have to get on their schedule to get to see them.
Oh, tell me about it, man.
I reach out to them and they say, "Dad, let me check."
Right.
You know, I'm like, "What you mean, let me check?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly
And
what
so
you
speaking
mean.
of father, because now we're talking about a nurturing father having a fatherhood or father figure,
Mm-hmm.
and then we're saying that some of the reasons that the African American male don't get involved in the process, whether it be political or the decision making, is because oftentimes there's layers like onions of different things that have built up over the years because of a lack of that interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we look at where we are now in the world, things are so different now. And so I have two boys, so I don't know what it is to raise a girl, but I got two grandchildren. I have a 2-year-old and I have a 3-month or is a 4-month-old grandbaby, and they're two girls.
Right.
And they are certainly different than my boys,
Yes,
you know.
yes.
And I don't know if it's true for all girls, but I know my two, both of them run me actually.
Oh, man.
My 4-month-old, she'll be quiet and late in people in my wife's arms, my son's arms, and she content. But when she in my arms, I gotta get up, I gotta walk
You
with
gotta
her.
do stuff.
Yeah,
man.
And she
Yeah.
only 4 months
Right,
old,
right,
you know.
right.
So I know you got girls,
Yes,
right?
yes.
You raise girls. Tell us about your girls.
Well, I actually want to go back to a point you made about
Okay.
the fathers and getting them in the political process or having their voices be heard. I think a critical part of that will be is examples, and what I mean by that is, you know, it's challenging now to see positive images of successful black men if they're not sports athletes or entertainers on TV. And just imagine young men growing up in environments or in households where they don't have examples of what man or a male is supposed to be. So that creates problems, if you will, to what they're supposed to do, whether or not they're supposed to go get involved in the political process, or whether or not they're supposed to go get a job, or, you know, they need to have examples of that. And one of the things I used to do in training fathers was show the history of examples of fatherhood and positive images of fathers, like on TV. You know, because it took me a long time. I grew up with images of the Cartwrights on TV.
Okay.
I grew up with images of Danny Thomas on TV. I didn't see a black father on TV till we got to Fred Sanford, and then maybe the Heathcliff Huxtable later on. So images of black fathers, we just didn't see them.
Okay.
So, and then when you talk about daughters and to transition into a specific way, if you will, that a father should behave, a dad with daughters. I mean, there's no book on that stuff, man. You know, it's trial and error.
Okay.
I had no idea. And that's why it's so important for dads to, in fact, be there, particularly with respect to girls, because you're like her first image of what a man is supposed to be, you know, and how she should be treated by a man.
And there's a saying, I don't know who said it or how true it is, that most times daughters marry their fathers, you know, and so the qualities that they see in their father, that's the qualities that they look for.
Exactly.
And in essence, if it's a abusive father, then a lot of times they'll marry or connect with an abusive person,
Yes.
you know, and so forth and so on. And so
What they see is what they'll be.
Say that again?
What they see is what they'll be.
What they see is what they'll be.
Yeah.
All right, all right. So now, with your daughters, tell us about your daughters.
Wow.
Without getting in trouble.
I am the proud father of two incredible young women.
Okay.
And when I say proud, like I mentioned earlier, there's no manual to being a father. And when I look at my daughters, it really lets me know that it takes two, a mother and a father, because we both have our roles in the rearing of our children. And I didn't know anything about raising girls, but in doing the things that I did, one of the things that I did was watch the relationship between their mother and the daughter, and then you mentioned earlier about there's a system. Well, watching the relationship between my daughters and their mother, I watched how daughters play fathers,
Right.
But I mean, in your daughters are the apple of your eye, man.
Okay.
You don't ever want to see them cry. You don't ever want to see them hurt. So you're gonna do whatever you can to keep that from happening.
So just let them have their
Just
way.
let them have their way, exactly. And then you find out from the mama that, see, she got you again, huh?
Okay.
Right. But one of the things that really intrigued me about daughters is that it takes a lot more with daughters. I always say that and I mean this in the best of ways, they're high maintenance, man.
Okay.
You have to think about accessories when you have daughters. Hair getting done every other week, and then when they get to that age, nails and clothes and all of those things, well, I can take if I had a son, I'd take some clippers and get to his head on my own.
Well, while they're young anyway. Yeah.
Right. But girls, you get into the natural protector that men are. It really takes on a whole new meaning when you have daughters.
Okay.
Because you don't want anything to happen to your daughter. And then when they get into relationships, that's a real challenging time.
Okay.
With our sons, we a little different.
Right,
man.
right,
I mean,
right.
society will have us go ahead out there and conquest. Do your thing out there. But as a father with daughters, you want to bring them on home. Let me check this one out.
Okay.
You want to get intimately into their lives,
Okay.
and you have to remember, and particularly as they get older, that she's turning into a woman. And you have to respect her as such. As long as, even though in your mind and heart she's gonna be your baby all her life, but she's turning into a woman.
All right. Well, listen, we're out of time, and just for some takeaways as we close out. So we're saying that the fatherhood piece is broader than just a daddy being at home, but the fatherhood piece impacts the life of a child in ways that we really can't describe. And I do agree that there is no manual, whether it's daughters or whether it's sons. There's no manual to raise the children.
Right.
I oftentimes say, even though you own them, you don't control them.
Right.
And once they begin to get influenced by other people and other things, they begin to make their own choices. And so fatherhood is important. And so, listen, I'm really excited about this Nurturing Father program that we're going to be working on. And I really did see that impacting the life of a young black male when it comes to getting involved in the political. But now I can kind of see how that nurturing fathers piece can really impact not only their decision-making process, but it also impacts how they view the world and how they get involved.
Exactly.
And so, listen, we're going to have to probably, expand this conversation
I'm looking
on
forward
fathers.
to it.
So maybe on next week, we may just talk just about fathers in general.
Okay.
Father
I'm
in
looking
general,
forward to it.
and give some nuggets to the father. You could give some from the father-daughter perspective, and I can give some from the father-son perspective.
Okay. All right.
And see if our goal is to men mentoring men. Our
Right.
goal is
Right.
to, have content that can help you as a African-American male or any male, but particularly the African-American male, to begin to mature to the degree that you're able to make better decisions. Life is not desire-driven. Life is choice-driven. So it doesn't matter how much we desire our lives to be a certain way. Our lives are a product of our choices. And so we want to get you to a place, mentor you through this venue to help get you to a place where you make better choices. And so, listen, thank you again for tuning in. I wish we had more times. This is very exciting. But listen, next week, same time, same place, Wednesdays at 1 o'clock here on Man to Man. So thank you again. Thank you, Terrence, for being with us again. I look forward to you coming back on next week.
I will be here, man. I might beat you here next week.
All
I'm
right,
excited
all right.
about this.
They say
man.
don't meet me there, beat me
you
there.
there.
All right.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, God bless you all. Thank y'all for tuning in.